Chapter 31 New York Speeds Up. About $17 million worth of property had been wiped out by the fire of 1835. These modern abominations, the gas pipes and high buildings of 4 and 5 stories, are to blame, grumbled some, but their grumblings were ignored in the amazing real estate boom that followed. Throughout the city, new and better structures were making their appearance. Nevertheless, something was wrong with the times. By 1837, the price of everything followed the lead of real estate. Probably President Jackson's war on the national banks had done as much harm as anything, and on February 10th of that year, a huge mob of hungry citizens gathered menacingly in City Hall Park. When one of their leaders shouted that 400 or 500 barrels of flour were stored in a warehouse on Washington Street, they rushed pell-mell to the place, broke in, pelted the mayor when he attempted to address them, and whitened the sidewalks with their wreckage before the police could restore order. In March, a financial panic struck New York another blow. Many firms failed for large amounts. All banks stopped payments, and that they were able to resume in the following year was due to the able management of James Gore King. By 1850, New York had made improvements which erased most of the unsightly marks of fire and famine. John A. Stevens had come back from a trip to Egypt with plans of some of the tombs he had visited, and when the state appointed him as a commissioner to build a prison on the site of the old Collect Pond, he designed the original Tombs Prison in the Egyptian style. The Second Trinity Church was torn down and the present one completed in the year 1846. Speed became the watchword, while the Methodist Ladies Missionary Society established their epoch-making 5 Points Settlement House to combat the evils of New York's prodigious immigration. Politics began to reflect the unhappy results of a population too new and too large for its machinery. Nevertheless, this same unwieldy array of foreigners really made possible the upbuilding of the new city. Without their labor, the miles of railroads, the horse-car lines, the First and Sixth Avenue, and even the development of truck gardens in Queens would scarcely have been possible. New York was going through a period of physical growth unparalleled in the history of cities. Fine new homes were springing up around the Washington Parade Ground. Samuel Ruggles had laid out Gramercy Park for the exclusive use of the homeowners who overlooked it, and the world of fashion was creeping up Fifth Avenue. Many more laboring hands were needed during the years spent on the Croton water system, and by October 1842, its completion was marked spectacularly by a great fountain near the site of the present post office in City Hall Park, which shot a column of water 50 feet into the air, assuming a variety of forms. At the same time, the opening of over 50 miles of aqueducts and 2 vast reservoirs, one in Yorkville and one on Fifth Avenue, where now stands the public library, was celebrated in a great parade and much oratory. Then, too, an army of workers was needed to turn the waste goose pasture, where William Cullen Bryant loved to walk and escape from his editorial worries, into Central Park. Its wide acres had been entrusted to the artistic hands of Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux. But years, money, and above all, labor were needed to create this noted playground. Most important of all, the shipyards needed 10,000 men who could hammer nails, measure off miles of rope, and fashion acres of sails. During 7 magic years, in the very middle of the 19th century, the golden age of the clipper ship fairly bathed New York in its glow. China opened wide her ports for tea trade, Britain repealed her navigation laws, and California, a bit drunk with her discovery of pay dirt, offered as high as $44 a barrel for flour. Slender, graceful racing yachts, more skillfully built in the yards of Brooklyn and New York than anywhere else in the world, tacked and veered their way around the Horn, making new records for speed and often clearing their construction cost in the first trip. It is true, there were plenty of smokestacks bobbing about the wharves on the Hudson side of Manhattan. Steam navigation was being improved steadily, especially in Great Britain, but New York seemed carried away by the romantic lure of the clipper ship. Practically every international trader owned at least one, and vast wagers were laid on races to San Francisco and back. The Sea Witch, with her black and gold hull and Chinese dragon figurehead, kept the record for 3 years, and when the Flying Cloud cut it down by a few days, her exultant owner had the log of the voyage printed in gold on white silk for distribution among his friends. The age demanded communication, ships, railroads, messages. As if the spirit of Hendrik Hudson breathed again on the banks of his river, New York had a hand in nearly all the passageway developments of the time. In 1853, with Cornelius Vanderbilt in control, 12 railroads took the first step toward consolidation into the Grand Central System, having its terminal in New York City. The Erie had been the first through trunk line, and the Pennsylvania system was in progress of organization. Back in 1839, the bulging carpetbag of William Herndon, carrying packages back and forth between New York and Boston, had set up another kind of communication, a modest beginning for the great diverse express business of today. 2 inventions of the period have left their indelible mark on the city's growth and industry. The sewing machine of Elias Howe made possible quantity clothing manufacture, a kind of manufacture that takes the minimum of space in a crowded metropolis, and is therefore New York's own industry. The second invention, a vertical screw railway, which in 1850 raised freight from floor to floor at 201 Cherry Street for Hecker Brothers, millers, was the parent of the elevator, without which flower and 5-story buildings could never have grown into skyscrapers of 40 and 50 stories. In such an age, it was natural that distinguished visitors should continue to appear. Barnum established a precedent for later impresarios when he charged $225 for a seat in Castle Garden at the opening concert of Jenny Lind. Charles Dickens was the recipient of the city's lavish hospitality, though later he said some rude things when he published his American Notes. Louis Kossuth, the Hungarian patriot, was acclaimed by New York with the deepest and most sincere emotions. In spite of such evidence of prosperity and culture as the Crystal Palace on the site of Bryant Park, where a World's Exhibition of Industries was held in 1853, the building of the Academy of Music on 14th Street, and the establishment of the Philharmonic Society in 1842, panic was once more in the air. Rioting, however, was given a stern lesson in the Astor Place tragedy of 1849, when the militia, firing upon a mob gathered before the theater to take sides in a personal feud between 2 actors, Forrest and Macready, killed 22 persons and wounded at least 20 more. Rioting was checked, but unrest persisted. By 1857, over-speculation, overbuilding of gallant clipper ships, and perhaps the very spirit of optimism and exaggeration that had pushed New York so far, brought a severe reaction. The Ohio Life Insurance Company failed first, precipitating about 985 other failures in the city. Anything will make a fortune, provided it has stock to sell, had been New York's belief too long.